Hi, I'd like to welcome you to Minelab's advanced instruction video on the SD2200d. Minelab are very proud of this detector. It's packed full of new features and technology. My name's Doug Stone and I'm very proud to be associated with this video with Minelab. I've been using detectors since way back in the 1970s, and we didn't need big deep digging tools like this. We just had little geological hammers. We found gold, and the thing then I remembered was that the difference between people who find it and don't find it, one, patience, but knowing how to use your machine. Now, I've been associated with this industry now for 20 years, producing. I've written books for the lay people on gold prospecting and detecting, produced maps of the gold fields. Also, we take people all over Australia on our gold expeditions. And the one thing I've learnt, that if you put the time in on the machine, you'll have a lot of fun and success. This advanced instruction video presumes that you've read your manual that comes with the SD2200 thoroughly. We want to follow the following topics to make sure that you really get the best out of your machine. The points we want to elaborate on are automatic ground balancing, how it works and the very best ways to use it. Discrimination, its advantages and limitations. The best search techniques, locating, pinpointing and digging your target. We will also talk about our responsibilities when we're prospecting in the bush. We presume you've read the instruction manual and know how to switch the detector on. We're now going to show you the correct startup procedure. This is the startup of the 2200. We flick it to the on position. The channels, we select both channels. Now the threshold, we've got to just bring it in where we get a faint hum. It shouldn't be too loud, it shouldn't be too soft, just in the centre. Then with the audio boost, we go to neutral or normal, and the tone, it's just a matter of turning that around to select the right tone for your ears. Threshold's very important. You want to achieve a faint hum. If it's too loud or too soft, you'll miss deep targets. The 2200's got a tune function which you use when you get to a new location. And to use it, all you do is raise the coil and turn it at 180 degrees and listen to the point where you get the worst interference. Press your tune button and what'll happen, you'll hear the detector tune it, work out at the best frequency for that area, and that'll be followed by a beep with 3 little beeps. And it takes about approximately a minute to do this. On the front of the detector, switch into all metal, then switch balance mode into fixed. Now we go to the automatic ground cancelling, which is the end of our startup process. We're in fixed. I flick the switch up to tracking, and in a 5-second process I pump the detector up and down very quickly, only about 2.5–3 inches off the ground. And what this does, you'll hear the machine go from being very noisy to going very soft in harmony with the threshold. I move it over the area, and that ground cancelling is put into the memory of the machine, so as you detect this area around us, any variation in ground noise will be automatically compensated by the new machine. Now we've completed the ground cancelling, we've finished the initial startup. Now if you've read your manual, all of you would have been able to understand that. Now we're going to have a look at some of these functions in much more detail, so you're really going to get the best potential out of your new 2200. The channel 1 and channel 2 switch are on the back of the detector, and you have them switched so they're both operating simultaneously. And what that switch is doing is actually underground operating 2 search patterns, and these are overlapped so that they'll pick up the different characteristics of nuggets. If you look at these nuggets, they range in size, colour, all sorts of things, and by rearranging these search patterns you're able to pick up the variation in the nuggets. And this is actually what sets the 2200 apart from earlier SD detectors, because what Minelab have been able to do is change these patterns so that there are less falling through the net.
With previous Minelab SD detectors, the 2000 and 2100, we were often forced to work in channel 1 on extremely mineralised ground. What's been introduced with the 22 is the automatic ground counselling, and this has cut out this, and it's only in extreme situations that you'd have to operate in channel 1, and I actually recommend that you operate in both channels. Automatic ground counselling is very simple to use, and it really makes detecting much easier, but there's a few points we should explain. You need to ground balance immediately you get a change in ground mineralisation. This is a good example on this dump. On my left hand side I've got this sort of lighter area that's not as heavily mineralised. On the right it's far more mineralised. Now the SD2200 will be able to go across this and cope with that mineralisation. But if you get an extreme change, as this hot rock, if you're looking at this lateritic material and you're working this area, you'd have to come across, rebalance and work that. There are some special techniques when using the automatic ground cancelling. The machine is looking after the ground cancelling for you, but you still have to be conscious of your coil sweep and keeping that as close to the ground as possible. Just think of the coil as a hovercraft. You want to mirror the surface of the soil. So don't whip the coil, and we don't want you raising it. What the best technique is, actually leave it on the ground and use the skid plate. That's what it's there for, under the coil, and that'll achieve the best depth penetration. So basically with this detector, the ground counselor is looking after you, but you've still got to be very conscious of your coil technique. The first thing to understand is that the 2200 has a programmed trigger, which immediately a target is sensed, it cuts out the automatic ground cancelling, and this is controlled by the level adjust knob. The level adjust control allows you to fine-tune the automatic tracking function. In highly mineralised ground, the knob should be set to the low position, anti-clockwise. In lightly mineralised ground, it is turned towards the higher position, that's clockwise. When walking across the ground, the automatic ground balance is readjusting all the time for changes in mineralisation. So that a nugget is not balanced out, the 2200 will pause or stop ground balancing immediately a target is detected. The level adjust control decides how small a signal is recognised as a target and not as a mineral change before pausing the tracking mode. It is therefore recommended that when working in heavily mineralised ground, the level adjust control is set in the first half. In areas of light mineralisation, we would recommend that you operate in the second half of the control. Beware when operating the automatic ground cancelling in the anti-clockwise position, because this is the position where it is most effective, and it's possible if you detect a small target or a faint target and swing backwards and forwards across it, you could ground cancel it out. But you won't if you immediately find a target or detect a target, lean down and flick the tracking into fixed. We've got a target. Now what we've got to do, we're bringing the fixed control in. With the detector at present when I came up there was in automatic tracking. What I do to pinpoint and help identify that target, I don't continue swinging over the target, I leave it in tracking and I move slowly away from the target and circle it. Once I've done that, I then flick it down into fix. And what this does, it locks the automatic ground cancelling out. But the advantage is I've got an average of the mineralisation surrounding that target. So when I come back over it, I get a very precise target signal. Now, what most people are doing, they're leaving the detector, when they've got the target, they're leaving the detector in tracking. They're not going to fixed, and their first thing is they're back over over the target like that, crisscrossing it. Now if it was a very faint target, what that achieves, in automatic ground cancelling, you could null it out. If it's right on the extreme of the detector, you could go out and you could lose your signal. And what the fix does, it achieves a much better ground balance from the surrounding area, and you'll come over that target and it is clear and precise, and then you deal with it. There are two discrimination modes you can choose, discrimination and discrimination ID. But you must remember, when you're discriminating, you've got to use your double D coil. With discrimination ID, that can be used both with your double D and your mono loop coils. The discrimination mode works on strong signals, so any weak signals will be interpreted as non-ferrous. That is, it can help distinguish between ferrous junk and non-ferrous valuables. Let's talk about the disk mode. This is the mode that you'll be operating in most of the time. But just remember, for the machine to correctly interpret the signal, you need a reasonably strong signal. I'll just demonstrate how this works. What we've got here is a complete blank, and as you move the coil towards the target, what is happening, you get a part signal, it comes up, rises, blanks up, and as you move away it tails off.